ॐ तव कथामृतं तप्तजीवनं कविभिरीडितं कल्मषापहं श्रवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भूरिदा जनाः. The nectar of thy words revives the scorched spirit of human beings. They purify the sinner and are the life of the holy. To hear them itself is auspicious and peace generating. They are the real givers who spread thy name far and wide. Welcome to the scripture class today. And today's scripture is the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Today is the auspicious day, holy day of Good Friday, the day when Jesus Christ ended his life. His life was sacrificed for the sake of humanity. And he chose, or God chose to end his life in a very, very, very pain-generating way for the devotees who loved Jesus. For them, it was very painful. But that's how the incarnations of God, they leave this world. We know Rama drowned himself in river Sarayu. Sri Krishna chose to go to heaven after concluding his human Leela by getting a shot of a poisonous arrow in his leg. Sri Ramakrishna chose to have cancer, suffer a lot, and then he left and concluded his divine Leela. Jesus was also in the same way. Jesus also chose to end his divine Leela by being tormented, tortured, and crucified. So we remember the sacrifice of these holy men, the incarnations of God. Everyone that has born and wants to do good to the world is not afraid of sacrificing their life. It is said in one of the Niti Shatakam of Bhartrihari, Dhanani Jivitam Chaiva Pararthe Pragya Utsrijet. Sannimitte Barang Tyago Vinashe Niyate Sati Dhanani Jivitam Chaiva Pararthe Pragya Utsrijet. When we know that this life is short and it will go, it has to be given up. So the wise people, they give their life and wealth for parartha, for the good of others. In the case of incarnation, whole their life is a gift to humanity, not for the people only at their time, but for the whole humanity, for posterity also, equally valid. And that's how their concluding the Leela in the world is varies from incarnation to incarnation. And we know how Jesus uh, was crucified, took all the burden, all the pain, all the suffering, and he himself gave up his Leela of in the physical life. So we remember the sacrifice of Jesus, we remember his love, and we remember his forgiveness. Among that terrible torture, also, he said, Father, forgive them. So this day reminds us of that forgiveness, love, and sacrifice for the sake of others. Why to sacrifice? There comes the Vedanta, because others are not other than you. All we call others are our own selves appearing as other. There is no other. Swami Akhandananda used to say, who is other? There is no other. It is all ourself, myself that appears as this universe, as other human beings, as this whole nature. It my own self appears as this. So, in sacrificing for others, in loving others, we love ourselves. Sacrificing others, we sacrifice for ourselves. So, we remember the great life of Jesus, on this holy day of Good Friday. And today also is a New Year's Day for the Bengali speaking people all over the world. And also yesterday was for Punjabi speaking people was the Good New Year's Day. So all this auspicious time, spring coming, so all this happy days coming. And today's gospel, chapter 18, Yam at Dakshineswar, part 2. We begin that chapter today. December 26, 1883, winter time in Kolkata, the best season, the winter season. And Sri Ramakrishna, accompanied by Manilal Malik, M, and several other devotees, was in a carriage on his way to Ram's new garden. The garden, which Ram had recently purchased, was next to Surendra's. Ram adored the master as an incarnation of God. He visited Sri Ramakrishna frequently at Dakshineswar. Manilal Malik was a member of the Brahmo Samaj. The Brahmos do not believe in divine incarnations. This is the introduction of M about the devotee, different kinds of devotees, Manilal and Ram. And Surendra, of course, he has said a conversation with Surendra was a great devotee. He loves Sri Ramakrishna. But Ram was one of the first two who proclaimed, not only believed, but proclaimed that Sri Ramakrishna is an incarnation of God to everyone. And the other was Girish Ghosh. Very boldly they proclaimed that Sri Ramakrishna is not human being, he is incarnation of God. Their love for Sri Ramakrishna was that's why boundless. Their reverence for Sri Ramakrishna was not a reverence to a human being or a saint, but to God himself. So Ram is very happy today. Sri Ramakrishna is coming to his garden first time. And he had purchased garden on advice of Sri Ramakrishna. Ram wanted to do sadhana. He was in the medical college. He was a chemist, learned person, a scientist, but he was very spiritual. That's how in India spirituality and science had always been together. They were never opposed to each other. And when once he asked Sri Ramakrishna, so I want to do sadhana, meditation, where should I do? He said, look out for a place which is where the people are not frequented. It's a nirjan. It's a secluded, isolated place. There no disturbance will be there. So he was searching for that, and they say he found out that this place in Kakurgachi area of Kolkata, in the northern Calcutta at the time, and it was very secluded garden. Nobody visited there. There was no house, and there he purchased the land and area there. Kankurgachi. Still, there is a one Ramakrishna. That very place where Sri Ramakrishna visited is there now the center of Ramakrishna Math and Mission, and it's called Yogodhyan Math, Jogodhyan Math in Bengali. And they are generally vice president of the order. He resides there. Bhutesanandji was there for many years. You all know. He was a very honored vice president. Gahananandaji was there, and Omkaranandaji was there. All vice presidents live there. Generally, it is headed by the vice president of the order. There is the temple of Sri Ramakrishna, which is a statue. Every day, worship is done to him. Prasad is offered to the people. And many people of Kolkata area visit that place regularly for the prayer, for meeting the monks. And that's a very holy place, Jogodhyan, Kakurgachi Jogodhyan Math. So here, Sri Ramakrishna came with Mani Malik, M, and several other devotees. They all came there, accompanied by, and they were in the carriage. And why M has to say that Manilal Malik was a Brahmo devotee and he didn't believe in incarnation of God. The thing comes later. Now, Master is conversing with Manilal Malik in the carriage. He's saying, in order to meditate on God, one should try at first to think of him as free from upadhis, limitations. God is beyond upadhis. He is beyond speech and mind. But it is very difficult to achieve perfection in this form of meditation. The upadhi is a Sanskrit word. We often say degrees are upadhis. He has been awarded with the upadhi of master's degree, upadhi of PhD degree, like that. But how it is, M has written it as limitation. Nikhilanji has translated it as limitation. The more you get honors or you get some degrees, then you those are all they're all limiting adjuncts. That's what the upadhi is translated. Limiting adjuncts, limiting honors, something that limit you. So that is called upadhis. So when we say God is the any quality that is put on God is limiting. So that's a very logical way to say how this glory of God is actually limiting God. When you say God is this, that means God is not that. So that this limits God to that. It separates God. It limits God. That's why upadhi is limitation, says em. In this way, it is translated here as limitation of God is limited. So, though you add qualities, but the very qualities become limitation. And Sri Ramakrishna also says this: when you pass exams, so that is not really passing exam, it is the pasha of Sanskrit, that bondage of Sanskrit. One more bondage added, one more limitation added, one more upadhi added. You were a graduate and undergrad, and that was one limitation, upadhi. Oh, he's an undergraduate. In India, we call it graduate. Now, after that, he does post graduation. One more pasha or bondage is added. How bondage? Because that will bring him a pride that I'm a learned person, among the few who are masters. After that, he does the PhD, then still more greater bondage, more greater, that's ego inflation that will all happen, and that becomes bondage. Pas means pasha of the bondage, noose. That's how Sri Ramakrishna once described about this, who has passed the exams, who has qualified, so much of qualification. So Sri Ramakrishna says here, God with upadhis. He is love, He is creator, He gives glory. They all limits God. You cannot say God does this because there is nothing that God cannot do. That's why you cannot limit God saying that God is without form. Even saying God is without form is adding upadhi to God, as if God cannot have form. You are already limiting God's power to only to remain as formless. He cannot become with form. So that is also putting limitation to God. It is also adding upadhi to God. God is formless. And if we say God is beautiful, God is any creator, all that becomes upadhis. So reality, God is God. How is God? He cannot be described. He is beyond any imagination, any expression. God is limitless. So you cannot say He is with form, without form. And yet He is with form and also without form. That is there. But all these, when we say God is with form, we are putting limitation, upadhi. God is without form, another limitation. And when we say God is with form, without form, and many more than that, whatever God is inexpressible, unthinkable. Then we try to remove upadhis from God. And only way to describe God as much as we can do without by removing all upadhis is God is Sat Chit Ananda. Or in the words of Swami Vivekananda, love. God is Love, pure love, pure Chaitanya. That's what is God's love. When you say we understand love a little, and then we try to find the limitless love. Ahaituki prema bhalobasha, the limitless, causeless love is God. No cause. Why God loves us so much? Why God is so lovable? If you say because God cares us, God makes us alive, He grants us air and water and food and shelter. All is by God. We live because of God. God is so compassionate. That's why we love God. You are limiting God. Sri Ramakrishna didn't like this idea that God is so kind because He gives us livelihood, He gives us life. That is not the real love of God. God will do that because we all belong to God. If God's love is not expressed in the way only by which we survive or we have little comfort, God's grace will be more pronounced when we are pure in heart and we can love everyone. We have gone beyond hatred and anger. We have controlled our passions. If we could do that by God's grace is more pronounced to us in that way. More finer qualities we need to develop, and that will be the grace of God. And God is without any, ultimately, God is without any upadhi. So that's why they say when bhakti or love for God develops, glory of God becomes less and less. So Krishna with flute and with Sudarshan Chakra, all powerful, bedecked with jewel, that is one beautiful, very charming appearance. One is that. Another is Bala Gopala, that Krishna, the baby Krishna. Nothing, no power is seen, but full of love. That baby Krishna or the Krishna of Vrindavan is without many upadhis. So that is more greater love. That's why the gopis had for Krishna without any upadhis. Just love. Love for what? What did they get from Krishna when they loved Krishna, the baby Krishna or the boy Krishna? Nothing from Krishna in the material sense, all in the spiritual sense. He was, they could not just forget him, they could not leave him, they were always with him. So, like that is the love of God. It is inseparableness, the joy. And why do we love God so much? What does He give? I don't know why I love, but I have irresistible, unchangeable attraction and love for God. That is the real love for God. Not because of this, not the cause at all, without any cause. That is upadhi vihina prema for God. That happens. So here, Sri Ramakrishna is saying he is beyond speech and mind. Brahmins tried to explain God in that way. He's beyond speech and mind, and yet used to pray to God to give us compassion. And you are so nice, you are so good, knowing that it is there. But it is very difficult to achieve perfection in this form of meditation. So meditation doesn't happen. You recite some mantras from the Upanishads, sing some songs, and that was the upasana of Brahmos. But they tried to also meditate, but real meditation, on what are you meditating? What, upon whom you are meditating? Upon God, who is beyond speech and mind. So he is beyond mind. He's unthinkable. So how do you meditate with your mind and think of him when he is unthinkable? Abang manasagocharam. No answer for that. Something that can be thought, and they say we are meditating on God. That's why Sri Ramakrishna said it is very difficult to achieve perfection in this form of meditation. So he's trying to say to Manilal Malik, you do worship of God, you are devoted, you try to connect yourself with the divine who is Satchidananda. But the way you do is very difficult to really go dive deep into God. Now he says, but it is easy to meditate on an incarnation, God born as man. So that also is meditation on God, whom they are meditating as Satchidananda, saying that we meditate on Satchidananda. The same other person meditate on the form of God as the incarnation of God, meditating on Rama with bow and arrow and bright face, meditating on that brave Maria, that ideal human being, God incarnate as Rama. So you can meditate on that ever happy person, never disturbed by any situation of the world. Was nothing in the world could have any impact on this person, God born as this human being. That is Rama. You meditate on Krishna as the incarnation of God. So he is just a playful, joyful being, all happiness, joy, play. That is God born as. And you can meditate on incarnation of God, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or Buddha or Jesus or Sri Ramakrishna himself, knowing fully how the Leela, Nara Leela he has done. We can meditate on his aspect of human life, define life as the human being. So it is easy to meditate on God with form. He says to Manilal Malik, who only meditated on God who tried to meditate on God without form. But Sri Ramakrishna is saying what Sri Ramakrishna says in the Sri Krishna incarnation as avyakta hi gatir dukkham dehavad piravapyate. So for the person who is embodied means who has the feeling of body, that he is identified with the body. So for that person, avyakta hi gatir dukkham. If you think of reality as avyakta, inexpressible, it is not formed, so unmanifest, then that is very difficult. Dukkha, gatir dukkha. It's very, very difficult for a person who is embodied, thinks himself as the body, and yet thinks of God as without body. So it is very difficult. Sri Ramakrishna says that thing. So meditate on mm, on God as a man. That is much easier. And you are meditating on same God. The body is a mere covering. So body is the covering. When you say God, body is mere covering. It is like a lantern with a light burning inside, or like a glass case in which one sees precious things. He's describing about the body which we consider ourselves as. We consider ourselves as the body, but we are not the body. Body is just the covering. This is also an idea of meditation. And he gives the example so beautiful. And body is covering, but Atma inside, the real seat of consciousness or the Jivatma, that is like lantern. If you have seen lantern, the older generation must have seen lantern, kerosene lamps. That there is to be wick in the center, which to draw the kerosene, and it is to be covered with a glass, and the light would come all around. But the wick was covered with a glass, so that wind comes, then it will not blow out. That's why it was called hurricane lamp. Even in hurricane or in the winds, it will remain burning because glass is protecting it. That's why it's called hurricane lamp. From that, it became only hurricane. So that's how it's in Bengal called hurricane. But its name was lantern. So this lantern, the source of light is inside. Outside is glass. This body is like the glass that covers the lamp. But here, this we are not able to see the lamp, real and divine being, the divine Atman, the Jivatma or the Atma inside the body, because in our eyes we have made the covering. And though there is the divine in every being, every human being, we cannot see that, we cannot perceive the divinity in human being. And because we have not clear eyes, as if the lantern of the body of the being is covered with a black shoot, and we are not able to see that. It is not covered in the person, it is covered in our eyes, in our perception, power of perception. That's why we cannot see the divinity neither within us nor outside in others. So, but the fact is, Sri Ramakrishna used to see all divinity in every being. That's why when Girish Ghosh comes drunkard at midnight, Sri Ramakrishna sees that divine being in him, holds his hand and starts dancing. For him, Girish Ghosh was not the body. Girish Ghosh was that divine, pure Atman inside. And he says that like the things kept in a glass almirah, a glass case, and there is case, but everything inside is seen. So when our mind becomes pure, we have the perception of that divine being, that source of light in every being, that there is the divinity. We don't go on covering of this body or the covering of the mind, how angry that person is, how that becomes that greedy that person is. They don't have any option to see greed or anger. They see only the divine in other being. When we clean our eyes, the glass of the lantern of other person is clean. The cleaning is not on the body itself. The cleaning is our perception, our mind, and then we can see like the wicks being seen in a clean glass covered this lantern. Similarly, the Atman can be perceived. That's why Sri Ramakrishna gives the example of things kept in a glass case or a lantern covered by a chimney of the glass case. Now, after saying this, he must have said many other things, but this one he recorded there because it was very relevant for us to in posterity. Arriving at the garden, the master got out of the carriage and accompanied Ram and the other devotees to the sacred Tulsi grove. Standing near it, he said, "How nice! It is a fine place. You can easily meditate on God here." That was the purpose why Ram Datta bought this land of Kakurgachi, in Kakurgachi, bought the land of this Yogodhyan to meditate. And Sri Ramakrishna approves that this place is fit for meditation because it is so quiet, and there was the Tulsi grove. Tulsi plant is so holy basil, they call that. And that's why this Tulsi plant is there. It also gives the feeling of presence of God, how Tulsi is equated with the Vishnu. So Sri Ramakrishna was very pleased. He was very happy to see the place that is a fit place for meditate. You can easily meditate on God. Sri Ramakrishna sat down in the house, which stood to the south of the lake. Ram offered him a plate of fruit and sweets, which he enjoyed with the devotees. After a short time, he went around the garden. Now, he was made to sit. There is a pond, it is said, which south of the lake. Lake is not really lake, big lake like our Lake Ontario, but just a simple small pool. It's a small pond we call in British English or Indian English pond. And now it's all covered in a square pond there. Once I had gone there and I thought, let me touch this water of the pond. And it was, I went and at the last step near the water, when I went there, just I slipped down, wetting all my clothes, and I was visiting with the monks there after sannyasa. So that is very slippery there because it's not much used. But I could touch the holy water. Sri Ramakrishna might have touched, it's not described. But that is what is called lake. It is written lake here, but it's just a small pond of water. And the room where Sri Ramakrishna sat and had this refreshment, that small place is marked as the place where Sri Ramakrishna visited there. That house they might have remodeled. There is a house, no doubt, where ashram is there, Vice President Maharaj lives there, or the in-charge Maharaj lives there, and many other monks and other things like kitchen for the devotees and the monks, the temple, all are there beautiful. And temple is also on the other side of that pond with Sri Ramakrishna's marble image, very nice. That all came after, I think, not during Ram's time, maybe after Ram it might have come. I don't know when the marble image came. But that is the Yogodhyan Math. The name Yogodhyan also Ramdatta gave. Why Yogodhyan? Udhyana is garden. Garden of what? Not Tulsi Udhyan. But Yogodhyan. Udyana or garden for performing yoga, meditation. That was the purpose that he bought and gave beautiful name, Yogodhyan. That's what the name of the Kakurgachi ashram is. Yogodhyan in Bengali, Yogodhyan in Sanskrit, Yogodhyana. So that is the name given to that holy place where Sri Ramakrishna visited. We don't know after that he again visited or not, but that was the time he visited. Now he was so happy to visit this place, very holy, holy vibes. Sri Ramakrishna and he was offered fruit and sweets, and he enjoyed fruit and sweets. How did he enjoy? With the devotees. So all the devotees had, he also shared that with the devotees, and that was the real enjoyment. When we share with others, that is the real joy of having something when we eat. When we eat ourselves, that is not the real joy. Real joy is when we share the joy with others. That manifold the joy of having that thing comes. So Sri Ramakrishna also enjoyed that with the devotees. Devotees also had fruits and sweets. That's how the sadhu it was welcome. This is just a welcome thing. Water, and sometimes water with sweets, sometimes with fruits. The fruits are not very common in India. Generally, it's winter, so there's no mango even. So you must have brought some winter fruits which are available. There were no freeze that time. There were no cold storage that time. So some local fruits might be there, winter fruits. So that was offered to Sri Ramakrishna. Next, Sri Ramakrishna proceeded towards Surendra's garden. He walked on foot a little distance and saw a sadhu sitting on a couch under a tree. At once he went up to the holy man and joyfully began a conversation with him. So he was going to Surendra's property, which is not far from Ram Datta's property. And but later on, I think he sold it, and some Tatas bought that. And again, we have bought from Tata Company. They had a big oil mill there. They later on sold that. We have now that area. I think that was Surendra's garden. And Sri Ramakrishna was going to Surendra. He loved also Sri Ramakrishna very much. And on the way he was going to Surendra's place, he saw a sadhu sitting under a tree. He says the couch, it might be some like cot we call. It might be like some cot, put with some mattress the devotees have put, and the sadhu was sitting there. Sri Ramakrishna saw a holy man. He went there, approached him, and started conversing with him, and joyfully began a conversation with him. Began with joy, seeing a holy man. Now Sri Ramakrishna begins the conversation. To which order of monks do you belong? Have you any title? Giri, Puri, or the like? That's how the monks have titles. And there are 10 orders of Sankara sannyasis, Advaita sannyasis. And the Giri, Puri, Bharati, Vana, Ashrama, Sagara, Saraswati, so many titles are 10 titles. That's why they are called Dasanami Sannyasi, Dasanami Sampradaya, Dasanami 10 titles they have. Ramakrishna belongs to Puri Sampradaya, or they have the title of Puri, though we don't use it because Sri Ramakrishna's guru was Tota Puri. He belonged to Puri, so Sri Ramakrishna belonged to Puri, and all followers of Sri Ramakrishna, we all belong to Puri's sect, Puri Sampradaya of Shankaracharya, of course. These are all Dasanami Sampradaya, they are the followers of Shankaracharya, Adi Shankaracharya. And he asked to which you belong. You belong to the Sanami Sampradaya or a Vaishnava Swami, or you are not a Shankara follower and yet the lover of God, the seeker of God. So the sadhu says, people call me a Paramahamsa. So this is the humility of the sadhu. So he said, I am called Paramahamsa. Paramahamsa generally don't use the title like that. So like Yogananda Paramahamsa, he was not a monk of our order, Yogananda Paramahamsa. Swami Yogananda was a direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, Jogin. But Yogananda Paramahamsa was follower of Lahiri Mahashaya and all that. So he didn't belong to Dasanami Sampradaya, Yuktananda Giri and all that. But he didn't belong to that. So this and he didn't write the name also. They say Yogananda Paramahamsa. So Paramahamsa is the state of sadhu when he goes beyond all adjuncts or limitations or even the title. They don't use even the title when they are Paramahamsa. So he said, I don't belong to any title. Even if it was the Sanami Sampradaya, he said, I have no limitation now attached to me. People call me Paramahamsa Sannyasin. That's what he said humbly. People call me Paramahamsa. Master, that is good. I am Shiva, that is a good attitude. Paramahamsa sannyasins are like that. But I must tell you something else. Now Sri Ramakrishna is giving something more to the sadhu, which maybe he's listening first time. The process of creation, preservation, and destruction that is going on day and night is due to Shakti. Now, process of preservation and creation, preservation, and destruction that is going on day and night is due to Shakti. So you are a Paramahamsa sannyasi, you believe only in Brahman, that will be incomplete. Do you believe in Shakti or not? The power of God, which is the real cause of creation, preservation, and destruction. And that is going on all the time. That's what he says. Sri Ramakrishna says in our life also, we go to, there is pralaya, which is called destruction of everything, whatever is created. Pralaya, prakrista rupena laya. Everything that is created goes back to naught, to the avyakta. It goes back to the mula avyakta, to unmanifest. So that is called pralaya. But there is laya, not pralaya, laya, merging of the personality of a being every day. Every day we go to Laya Prapti we have. What is that Laya? That is Sushupti. When our all modification, cognizance, all our awareness of the waking state, all are, they are suspended and as if we are dead to the world. That is called Laya. We are not aware to the world. It is like death. It is like death, daily death for the time being, when we are asleep, when you are not dreaming, even when you dream, your mind is active. But when you are in deep sleep, it is a kind of death. It is not pralaya, it is not dissolution, but it is, of course, merging of your consciousness of waking. True consciousness is never annihilated, it's always there, real consciousness, but the waking consciousness is suspended and we go to laya. That is laya. So this daily there is preservation and creation, preservation, and destruction. And also one way to see is this whole vast universe. And scientifically we know that there are so many creation going on. New galaxies are created, new solar system are being created. There are the nebulae, so many we can see through the powerful telescope. There are the solar system being created now from the cloud of creation. And there are other places, the sun is dying, the solar system is dying, galaxies are dying, and there are others which are staying. There are others which so far that we see the system, we see the galaxy or the solar system, and yet in reality they are not there now. All that has died. It was created, it existed for a long time, now it has collapsed, but still that is visible because that is so far that though there is no solar system in really existing now, but we perceive because light came, they were created, light came, and it took so much time to come light up to earth that in that time their preservation was gone and they are destroyed. So this creation, preservation, and destruction is going on in different parts of the universe every day. The Sri Ramakrishna say every day. But who does that? God does definitely. But God, this creation, preservation, when you create something means you want to make something. There is want. So you have some want, creating something. So you are not perfect. Want comes when you are incomplete. So is God incomplete? He has some want. So philosophically, again, the problem, like counting the leaves and branches, as Sri Ramakrishna says. And that's why it is said God does not create, he doesn't have any want. Who creates is the power of God. That is Shakti. Shakti is responsible for creating, preservation, and destruction, but God has nothing to do with that. So God's power does that. God's power we feel as the entity, the one who is responsible for creation is the Shakti or power of God. That Shakti is called Divine Mother because that has brought forth this whole universe with all the 24 cosmic principles. That's why she is Mother. Not only she creates, also she is responsible for preservation. And also, after preserving, again she will destroy. Who is she? She is God's power. So that's how Sri Ramakrishna is trying to say to this monk who called himself as a who said that people call him Paramahamsa, that there is the entity called Shakti. You cannot deny Shakti or power of God when you are embodied, when you feel you have a body, you are in the waking state or sleep or in the deep sleep state or in the dreaming state, you are embodied being. So there you are in the domain of Shakti. That's what Sri Ramakrishna is trying to tell to this sadhu. This primal power and Brahman are one and the same. How philosophically? You see, this power of God and God are one. So it is God creates through his power. That's how it is said. And power creates, God doesn't create. But in reality, when we see God as creator, then it is Shakti. The very God is Shakti. Ma Kali and Shiva are same. Brahman and Maya are same. When we see Brahman as this creator, preserver, and destroyer as Maya, then we call that Brahman as Maya in relationship with this creation where we are. When we deny creation, then Brahman is Brahman. Sri Ramakrishna beautifully described this to many places, and he says that one who creates active and who one is not active, inactive, sitting there, no action at all. Those both are same. How you look upon that reality, that you call. When you look upon that, he says, when I look upon the reality as creating, active, preserving, and then I call that reality as Maya, as Shakti. And when I see that as doing nothing, then I call it as Brahman. So Brahman and Shakti are identical, and our description or our thought about that reality depends on how we look upon that reality. So it gives the example, Sri Ramakrishna gives the example of snake at one place. Snake is coiled and sitting at one place. Inactive, just resting. That is the same snake. And after some time, that snake starts moving with a wriggling movement. The same snake, now active, moving, searching some food, doing something. That snake and the snake that was still and inactive are the same snake. So, one which was inactive was the Brahman. When we say snake like that, doing nothing, when that snake is active, that is Maya or Shakti. Like that is the description that Sri Ramakrishna gives. Shakti cannot exist without Brahman, just as waves cannot exist without water. There cannot be any instrumental music without an instrument. What a beautiful example. When you say Maya or Shakti, there has to be Brahman as its source. So Brahman, ultimate reality, we call Brahman, and Brahman, Maya cannot exist without Brahman. And Brahman cannot create without Maya. So both are true. And he says there cannot be any instrumental music without the instrument. Though the music is different, instrument is different, but one depends on other. To play the music, you should have the music. Instrument without producing music is no instrumental music. It's not functioning at all, just lying. But instrumental music produces music. Music is different, instrument is different. Music depends upon the instrument to be produced, to be heard, to be known. And instrument depends on the music to be manifested. So both are same, but one is dependent on the other for particular purpose. As long as God keeps us in his relative world, so long we feel that there are two. If one accepts Shakti, one accepts Brahman as well. If one is aware of night, one is also aware of day. If one is aware of knowledge, one is also aware of ignorance. So, Brahman and Shakti, we have to be aware of both things. As long as we are aware of Shakti, Brahman is there. As long as we think of the Brahman in this, in the world embodied being, there is Shakti has to be there. But there is another state in which God reveals to his devotee that Brahman is beyond both knowledge and ignorance. It cannot be described in words. What exists, exists. He comes to the final thing. No thanks, no thanks. What is that? Dependency installation. No. Yes, thank you. So again, when we think of the about the reality, it is beyond idea of Brahman and idea of Shakti. And what is that? How does it? How is that exist? So can you describe about the Brahman, pure consciousness? No, it cannot be described. What is pure consciousness? Is the pure consciousness. When we say consciousness will be like that, then we are limiting consciousness and objectifying consciousness. Consciousness is object, it is subject, it is our own being. So we cannot objectify the consciousness. What exists, exists. That's what is the philosophical term for describing the ultimate reality. We cannot describe anything about that. After a pleasant conversation with the sadhu, the master returned to the carriage, the holy man walking with him. Sri Ramakrishna looked upon him as a friend of long acquaintance, and they walked arm in arm. So Sri Ramakrishna came to return to the carriage. From there, Surendra's garden. Okay. So after that, he went to Surendra's garden by the carriage. It must be a little far away then. So he saw the sadhu there and he came to the carriage now. So sadhu accompanied him to see off. So Sri Ramakrishna was very pleased. No conversation of the sadhu is recorded. He might have said something in Hindi. Sri Ramakrishna knew Hindi. But Yem knew Hindi or not, we don't know. So nothing of the sadhu's conversation or his answers or his what he said is recorded here. What is recorded? Few conversation of Sri Ramakrishna. Yem always already memorized. Didn't take the note there, but in his mind he remembered what Sri Ramakrishna said that time. Now he came to Surendra's house. The master arrived at Surendra's garden. The very first thing he talked about was the sadhu. He was very pleased with the sadhu, and they walked arm in arm, and and they talked like acquaintance for a long time. When you find some person that you really like, whether to conversation or very vibes, then you don't say, I just saw him today. It feels like I know that person for a long time. You become very friendly in just a small amount of time. Very quickly, you become friendly to the person. But both have to have the similar vibes, and they have to really, the chemistry should work together. And that's what Sri Ramakrishna is, and AM is describing. They conversed and talked and spoke with each other and were arm in arm walking as if they knew each other for a long time, long acquaintance. but they knew themselves that time. It happens to us also. Some people, they come and you meet in some place in the aeroplane, you are flying together. Even very nice person, it was so nice to talk with that person. Just you have to start the conversation like that. It is to be same level of your mind, and that happens. So the very nice person. It was so nice time we had, like 3 hours, 4 hours. Just we went in conversation on talking about something. So that is how when our mind really match with each other, so it becomes so we feel maybe I knew that person along, become friendly in just a moment. That happens. So Sri Ramakrishna was talking. The first thing he talked about was the sadhu master. He is a very nice man to Ram. Bring him to Dakshineswar when you come. Sri Rama, the master arrived at Surendra's garden. Surendra was not there though. Surendra seems to be not there. He just walked to his garden or came by this carriage if it was a little far. So he said to Yam, he is a very nice man to Ram. Bring him to Dakshineswar when you come. He is really a good man. There is a line in a song to the effect that a man cannot recognize a holy person unless he is holy himself. So you recognize a good man will recognize another good person. They say during worship also, you cannot worship with the impure mind. With even to worship, offer the worship in a right attitude, you have to be very pure. And the Shastras say, Devo Bhutva Devam Yajet. You only God can really worship God. So if you can become pure and holy like God, then only you can worship God in front of you. Similarly, when you are holy, then you can recognize the holy person. That's what Sri Ramakrishna says this thing that people know. Not everybody can know the holy person. Who would understand Trailanga Swami as Sri Ramakrishna did? Sri Ramakrishna could find out who Trailanga Swami was, and he was like Sachala Shiva, the Shiva, moving Shiva was Trailanga Swami, and all holy persons Sri Ramakrishna could recognize. People couldn't recognize Sri Ramakrishna sometimes. Even the Bhagwan Das Babaji could not recognize Sri Ramakrishna. He sat on the asana that was made for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But later on, he recognized that he didn't sit by planning or doing something. He sat by divine order. Some force, divine force, made him sit on the asana that was made for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, for an incarnation of God. Sri Ramakrishna went and sat there. Like that, it happens, and people later on recognize he's not an ordinary human being. Now, Sri Ramakrishna is again talking about the sadhu, the master. He is a very, that's a next paragraph. The sadhu believes in God without form. That is good. God is both formless and endowed with form. He is many things more. There is one song, Mother, how are you? Who are you? Sakar, Akar, Nirakara. Who are you? We don't know. You have a form, and even beyond that, you have a form, you are formless, and even beyond these two, what can be with form, without form? What can be beyond that? If something is without form, then that will be with form. Something is with form, then beyond with form, then that will be formless. But Sri Ramakrishna says God is with form, without form, and also He is beyond both. So it cannot be comprehended. The God cannot be comprehended. He is many things more, not only one, many things more. The absolute and the relative belong to one and the same reality. The idea of absolute that we have now and the the relative that we perceive called this no, this phenomenon. So that all is the same thing. Nomenon and phenomenon is the same real. It belongs to the same reality, manifested and unmanifested. What is beyond speech and mind is born in the flesh, assuming various forms and engaging in various activities. From that one Om have sprung Om Shiva, Om Kali, and Om Krishna. So that's how the reality is Om. That's why they write Om Shiva, Om Kali, Om Krishna. Om at the beginning of any mantra or any name of God, Om. So Om is the formless aspect of God. That formless aspect of God manifests with the form of Krishna. It becomes Om Krishna. Om manifested as Krishna. Om manifested as Rama. Om manifested as Kali. All are the Om manifested. And what is Om? Om Tasya Vachaka Pranava. Om is the you can say symbol of God, word symbol of God. So that is the Om. Swami Vivekananda has clearly expressed what is Om. It represents whole knowledge system, expression of knowledge, whole thought process is all described in Om. That what we can think is in brief is Om. Very our power of thinking is Om. Power of intellect is Om. So Om is the ultimate word. That's why it is called. It is the name of God. Tasya Vachaka Pranava. Suppose the master of a house has sent out a small boy of the family to invite people to a feast. All look on the boy with great fondness and affection because he is the son or grandson of a prominent man. So, when a person invites on behalf of someone, young boy, not mature even, but everyone will love and like him because he is the son or grandson of that. He represents the person who has sent to invite. He is not. He is respected and loved by all because he represents that. He comes from that family, so they try to give him the respect as they would give to the one who is inviting themselves. That's how we do, and he gives the example that when you see a small boy, it reminds you of his parent or grandparent who with whom you are connected to, and that's why we give all love and affection and respect to the boy. You don't have to give the same respect you want at the feet of a small boy, but have the same fondness, same liking. Why that liking is there? Because this boy is connected with his grandfather or his parents. So that your relationship with the parents is reflected on your behavior with this boy. Though this is small, immature, just a boy, but you because it's connected with that. Similarly, the incarnation of gods, they come from the supreme reality, so that's why they are regarded, respected as the supreme reality. The God with form is the manifestation of God without form. So there is no difference. Thinking of God with form is as great as thinking of God without form. The master took refreshments at Surendra's garden house and then set out for Dakshineswar with the devotees. So that was this day's program. Very short description. Other places, so much conversation happens. This was very short, and he never. It is not even described whether Surendra was there or not. But he had again to have some refreshment as Surendra's garden house. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, when a holy man goes to somewhere, they must partake of offered something. They should eat something because that does good to the householder by taking some. Suppose you cannot take anything and there is nothing to give you, you should at least drink water. This is not for only for holy person. I think this is for everyone who goes and meets. That if that gives the satisfaction for your host, taking something, eating something, partaking something. So if nothing you want to take, have something. Sit down a little bit and drink a little water. That is the sharing of your goodness with their goodness. So that is very important, and especially for sadhus, Sri Ramakrishna has said that. At least you should drink water, otherwise you eat something. Just now we had the refreshment in Ram's house, now in Surendra's garden house also. He had some refreshment, and after that, he left for Dakshineswar. So much of joy Sri Ramakrishna always brought. It was a blessing, great blessing for Surendra's house also, and for Ram in his newly bought Yogodhyan or the garden of meditation, that place. So we conclude that conversation of that day. Next day will be the conversation on next script. Next gospel class will be the conversation of another day next time. So that we'll listen to that. Thank you so much. Now with the closing chant, we close today's class. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishnaarpanamastu Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Sritva Pranamami Muhur